Welcome, iMacros fans, to another episode of At Whim, automating the web with iMacros. Today we're going to be talking about iMacros for Chrome version 10, which just released on December 8th. Now this was a staggered rollout, so you may not have gotten the update just yet, depending on when you're watching this video, of course. It's been quite a while since the last major release of iMacros for Chrome. In fact, it's been a year and a half since version 8.4.4 was released. Now you might be wondering what happened to version 9. And I'll touch on that in just a bit. For now, let's talk about the most significant changes in version 10. But first, a little bit of background. Sometime this past summer, Ipswich quietly updated the iMacros End User License Agreement, or EULA. This revised EULA, which can be found on the iMacros website, now includes a clause that expressly prohibits the freeware versions from business or commercial use. So in other words, the freeware versions of iMacros are intended for personal use only, and if you do want to use them in a business or commercial setting, you're going to need one of the other licenses specifically for that purpose. Now, to make these licensing changes a bit more concrete, Ipswich has also removed some of the functionality from the freeware versions, specifically features that are most likely to be used in a business environment. This includes the ability to play external macro files as opposed to macros stored as bookmarks, as well as any command that requires disk access, such as the ability to read and write CSV files or to save web page screenshots. And on top of this, macros are now limited to a total of 50 lines. So, what is it going to cost now to get the full version of iMacros for Chrome? Well, if you're an existing customer, you're already covered. And if you stick around for the second part of this video, I'll walk you through how to get up and running with the full version of iMacros for Chrome in no time. But if you're not already a customer, get ready for this. The minimum license you'll need to purchase is the iMacros Personal Edition for $99. Yes, you heard that right. $99 US. Is that a fair price? Is it worth it to you? That's a question that only you can answer. I know that compared to free, $99 seems outrageous, especially considering the fact that historically, most browser extensions have been available for free, including iMacros. Would I pay that amount myself? Well, if I wasn't already a user of the Enterprise Edition, I have to admit, it would be a tough pill for me to swallow. But for me, it comes down to the value that I get out of the product and how likely it is to pay for itself. Remember, iMacros is a productivity tool, and in many use cases, especially business use cases, it does pay for itself many times over and rather quickly. But you don't have to pay that amount to continue reaping a lot of the benefit from using the freeware version. It's still quite a capable tool as is, and there are even some workarounds for the new limitations that, while they may be a bit more cumbersome to use, are still rather effective. Leave a comment below and let me know if you'd like to see a future episode showcasing some of those potential workarounds. If you do decide to continue using the freeware version, but all of your existing macros are stored as macro files that you can no longer play, I'll show you in the second part of this video how to easily convert those macro files to macro bookmarks. There's just one more bit of bad news, and that involves Mac and Linux users. Unfortunately, the paid iMacros licenses will only work on Windows. So if you're a Mac or Linux user, please don't purchase an iMacros license unless you also have access to a Windows machine. Now, before we get to the second part of this episode, I did want to mention why the version jumped from 8 to 10. The reason is that this release marks the consolidation of the iMacros for Chrome and iMacros for Firefox codebases. And since iMacros for Firefox was already at version 9, the decision was made to make this release of iMacros for Chrome consistent with the version number of the next release of iMacros for Firefox. If you want to know what's going on with iMacros for Firefox, subscribe to this channel and keep an eye out for a future episode covering that topic. Okay, so up next, let's take a look at how you can quickly get up and running with the full version of iMacros for Chrome version 10. So the first thing I want to show you how to do is to convert any existing macro files to macro bookmarks. You may have been previously using the file access module with iMacros for Chrome, and if you're like me, you have a number of macro files already existing out here on the disk in your My Documents folder. And so in order to be able to use these macros now with the new freeware version of iMacros for Chrome, we'll have to get those converted to macro bookmarks. The simplest way to do that is to open each one of these macro files one by one in a text editor. You can use Windows Notepad. In this case, I'm using Notepad++. Simply copy the full contents of the macro file, then come back over to iMacros for Chrome and start a new recording. But you don't actually have to record any steps. You can just click stop right away so that we get the iMacros for Chrome editor to open. Then we can select all the existing text of that recorded macro and replace it with the macro file that we just copied. Once we're finished with that, we say save as, and I'll give that the same name of the file on disk. So it's a little bit tedious, but once you're finished with that process, you'll have all of your macros up and running again in the iMacros sidebar. Now, if you do decide to go ahead and upgrade to the full version of iMacros for Chrome and purchase a license, or if you're already an existing customer, then the next step is to show you how you can go ahead and get the file access module downloaded and installed. Now, the location where you're going to download from is your Ipswich community account. So the first thing I need to do is get logged in there, and I will go ahead and run my community login macro to do that for me. All right, now I can close iMacros. And once you're in your community account, you want to click on My Products. Then go ahead and find your iMacros license. It does not matter which iMacros license you use if you happen to have multiple, as long as it's an active license. I'll go ahead and select my personal edition license since that is what most people will be using who are upgrading from the freeware. And once you're on the license details page, go ahead and click the download link. And in this dialog, you want to find the link for file access for iMacros extensions and click download there. Now, once that finishes downloading, we can go ahead and run that right away. Just accept all the defaults here, install. And once the installer is finished, it will detect whether or not there was an existing iMacros license on this machine. So if you're already a customer and you're installing on a machine that already had a license activated, it won't prompt you for this last step here to activate iMacros. It will just be finished at that point. But since I don't have a license on here already, I'm going to go ahead and leave that enabled and click finish. Now we get our iMacros license activation dialog, and I need to go grab my activation code, which is back on the product details page. So I'll just go ahead and select and copy that. Then we'll switch back to this dialog and paste that in. Click activate, and it says iMacros Personal Edition. We click OK. And the last thing that we need to do, and this is important, is restart the browser. So now that the browser's restarted, when we open up iMacros for Chrome, we can now click on the Files tab, and you'll see there are all of my macro files just as they exist on disk, and I have the full functionality now of iMacros for Chrome. So I hope you found this video to be informational and useful, and if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, please leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully you'll see me again soon. Thanks for watching.